Welcome, everyone. We're so excited for tonight's presentation, and we appreciate everyone joining us. Our speakers for the evening, we have Irina, who will be introducing Marianne, and then Marianne will give her presentation, and then we'll have the Q&A, which will be in the chat, as well as a live Q&A at the end. I'm Misty McCall. I'm the Executive Director for Villages of Summerfield Farms, and we welcome you to the webinar. Thank you for coming.
My name is Irina Wolfla, and I'm the founder of IWPR Group Public Relations and Community Engagement. And I'm delighted to be here with you all this evening. And with us is Marianne Cusato. She is an author, speaker, professor of the practice at the University of Notre Dame School of Architecture, one of the nation's leading thinkers on housing and planning, and someone I consider a friend. She's here tonight to unpack some of the things that you are most concerned about, whether it be apartments, crime, traffic, crowded schools, and the like. She'll speak for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to Q&A after that. Marianne?
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Irina, for the introduction. I want to start by saying that I'm not actually being paid to be here this evening. I know that there's a lot of very high emotions about what is being proposed in Summerfield. So Irina asked me to take a look at it. We've worked together for years and as a friend, but I'm also a longtime colleague of Dover Coles, Victor specifically, and Vince Graham's, and I know their work and I really respect their work, which is why I wanted to come and talk about some of the principles at a big picture level that about development, about how we should develop, and about what place can be. This is, it's very difficult. Anytime you're considering how your community should grow, it's really something to take seriously. So if you are concerned about the future of Summerfield, that's a good thing. There are going to be some people listening to this that have already made up their minds, as I hear, but I think there's also going to be, I hope there are a lot of people here that are really interested in learning about some of the principles of urban development, economic development, and growth that could really shape how you grow in the future. No growth isn't an option. If you do not grow as a community, your community will wither. Slow growth feels safe, but slow growth can also be can actually work against you. So how we grow is really, really critical. And that's what this talk is about, is demystifying a little bit of the concern, hopefully, talking about principles of apartments. It's going to be focused on apartments, but also looking generally at the principles of how we create patterns of development that are designed for success. I mean, that's what we all want. I think if we pull back, there's actually a lot more in common that all sides have, and that is that we want to live in thriving communities. We want to feel that our investment in the place that we live will continue to grow. We want to believe that we're safe, that our children's futures are in good hands because of the places we live. These are all fundamental things that we all want. And then the question is, how do we get that? How do we create places that create long-term and lasting value? These are some of the issues that have come up as the really big concerns, and you're right to worry about this. I mean, our homes represent for most of us, our largest portion of our net worth. Our children's futures depend on the schools that they go to. Our everyday existence of just leaving and coming from our homes, going to work and meeting our daily needs will be made worse if there's more traffic. If there's less traffic, it's more pleasant. And crime, we're all concerned about crime and the safety. Is it safe for your kids to go down the street and play? These are really valid concerns that universally we all want. We want to live in a safe community where it's easy to get around, where the future of our children is strong and the future of our investment is also strong. These are really valid concerns. Very often the concern is misplaced specifically around multifamily. And I'm going to talk about some of the myths that come specifically around larger numbers of homes together. But I want to start by saying anyone that's concerned, we hear the concern. I hear the concern. And that's why this talk is actually shaped around demystifying some of that and unpacking the concerns that are repeated in many cases, but not repeated with the studies behind them. So we're going to talk about that. And why does this matter? As I just said, your home is your investment, your children's future, and where your family sleeps and eats. There is nothing that is more sacred than that, because it's your family, it's your family safety. So of course you are concerned. And if you look at the patterns of development and growth that we have had over the course of the last 70 years in this country, you should be concerned, because we don't do a very good job in this country of building communities. And the reason why the instinct when any development comes is to say no, is because so much of it isn't good. And that's why on a project that looks at placemaking first and looks at community-based design, it changes the formula on that. That's why not all development is made equal. And so as a city official, if you're a city official, if as a concerned neighbor, it's right to ask questions. The important thing is asking the right questions, because you live in an absolutely gorgeous place and you should be concerned. But you should be asking the right questions. And so that's part of this talk too, is demystifying some of the major concerns and framing the questions you should be asking. One of my mentors and a close friend, Michael Lykoudis, always says that we have to change to stay the same. And very often, especially with economic development and patterns of development, the patterns that we've been building with don't replicate. It doesn't create a sustainable growth model. And there are pieces of it that have worked to date, and you have an absolutely beautiful city. But if you're like most cities, you also have an infrastructure expenses that have been deferred that you have to figure out how to pay for. You have the issues of just the municipality of operating it, of paying for police and schools and the operation. And when you spread out and grow, it can actually put more demand on that. And so your concerns for multifamily make sense, because you're saying, listen, we're growing and that's going to be a weight. The question, it actually is a reversal of what you might think. To support the streets that you already have, the schools that you already have, you need concentrated growth, and growth that is planned in a way that creates sustainable growth, as opposed to uncontrolled growth. And so that's the key question to ask. It's not whether you grow or not, because if you're a municipality, slow and no growth models, while they feel safer, are not going to get you where you want to go in a long-term situation. But if you want to maintain, and this is something that in watching some of the materials that have been put out is a key point that has been repeated, that Victor, I've seen in some of there was a video or something even about how the growth model happens to maintain the beauty of the place, the model of growth and the density of it. If you can make it more compact, it's actually less of a drain on your city resources, because the postal carrier drives less. It's easier to get to and from things, as opposed to more difficult. And so the concerns that you have are on target, but the formula for meeting those concerns is actually the opposite of some of the major concerns. I just put this image up because being in I teach architecture and planning here at Notre Dame. I'm also, I practice. I'm in the profession. I do events like this where I talk as a sort of an outside expert. And when I see a construction sign go up anywhere near where I live, I get nervous, because it is something you should be concerned about. And that's why it's really important to arm yourself, not with the fears, but with the knowledge base that goes into understanding how we have, how the formulas that we've been depending on for decades haven't actually served our needs. So let's talk about some perception and realities of the built environment and of economic development. One of the concerns that we've heard a lot of, I've heard as I was getting up to speed with the issues and concerns, is if you build multifamily housing, Summerfield is going to turn into Greensboro. So I decided, as I was putting this presentation, to do a screenshot of what Greensboro looks like. And there's a lot of pretty much the apartment in a field. This is not what is being proposed. And part of the reason why Greensboro looks the way it does, which is not something that could happen in Summerfield, actually goes back to 100 years ago. And I'm not going to go into a lengthy discussion on redlining, but 100 years ago, 70% of Greensboro, the FHA held loans out of. This is in the hazardous and the definitely declining neighborhoods. Now, these aren't the FHA maps. This is a different HOLC map, which is the nuance of this. Wasn't the actual map that held the capital out. But when you stop capital from going into a community, when you say 70% of the land in your community can't have loans, and when the residents that are there that can get loans move to racially restricted neighborhoods outside of the core of the city, 100 years later, you're going to get something that looks like this. You're going to get disinvestment and long-term generational poverty. So in this case, the correlation and the causation, they're not connected. Summerfield is not disinvesting 70% of its land. In fact, it's investing. You guys are investing in place, you're investing in community. So the results of the poverty that you find in Greensboro can't come here because it's illegal to do this. So some of the concerns that are being linked up are relative to historic policies that happened that are no longer in place. So let's talk about crime, the increase in crime. The idea that if you build multifamily housing, you're going to increase crime. It's actually the opposite is true. And I don't like putting slides up with a lot of text. Anyone that's looking at this longer term replaying, you can pause it and read this. But essentially, the studies show that actually multifamily housing has lower crime than single family residences. This will also really be a critical thing to differentiate between the type of design that you have. That some designs, the physical arrangement, and I'm going to talk about this later, that the physical arrangement of the buildings, that will change how the outcome of the safety outcomes are, because the social infrastructure that is created by using a term that Jane Jacobs coined, eyes on the street. When you create a community with fewer places for people to hide, when you bring the buildings up to the street and create a street where when you're walking down that street, you feel like if something happened to you, somebody would see. Not only does that actually reduce crime in a high crime area, when you fix broken windows, when you define a street and clean empty lots out, you actually reduce crime and you don't deflect it. The built environment, a good urban environment, even if it's disinvested, and this place isn't going to be disinvested, it's going to be actually invested in, that crime goes down because the physical environment, depending on how the apartments are designed, and the design of these apartments by Dover Cole are the type of apartment that will create safer communities. So this is just because there are housing units that are attached together, it does not increase crime, especially when the design of it supports placemaking. Traffic. This is one that it feels like, well, you're putting so many houses in, why wouldn't there be more cars on our streets? Interestingly, there's two things here. One, it actually single family homes generate more traffic than cars, very often because single family homes have more people in them. So imagine how many cars do you have in a house with a couple high school age kids and a couple working parents versus an apartment with somebody that's single or a single parent. So there's more cars per household than in single family homes than in multifamily homes. And those cars tend to generate more traffic per household. So it's more times, and it changes throughout the week between weekends and weekdays. If you are building a community that has a mix of uses, where the apartments are on walkable streets, where you can actually get out and get to some, and understanding this is not a downtown area, but it will still have some mixes of uses. So you're not eliminating the cars, but you're reducing vehicle miles traveled, and you're reducing the number of trips outside of the household. The more rooftops closer together facilitate that, and it actually continues to reduce traffic. I would highly suggest an overall, if you guys haven't done already, and I don't know, I didn't ask this question, but an overall traffic study of the entire area, because you may find too that areas outside of the development planned would benefit from an overall network redesign. And you were working with one of the nation's leading traffic engineers in Rick Hall. He does excellent work creating safe streets that are multimodal in a network. If you have one way in and one way out, you're always going to have extra traffic, but the more connections that you have, it diffuses traffic around. So again, multifamily by its nature alone does not actually add more traffic per household compared to single family. Schools, this is another one. If you have more households, you are going to overcrowd the schools. Nobody wants an overcrowded school. We all want the best future for the next generation. We want them in small classroom sizes. We want to fund great schools. But actually, and this is from a Harvard study, that the households, especially, so this is both for existing apartments, the study, and for new construction of single family versus new construction of apartments, that the single family per 100 households, single family homes actually produce more children than apartments. Again, it's housing size. You know, if you have a larger home, you're going to naturally, if you have more kids, you're going to gravitate to a larger home. If you have a smaller family size, and we have our demographics overall are shifting in this country to 1- and 2-person households, a lot of empty nesters. Apartment living is much more attractive for smaller households rather than a larger single family home. So there's a lot of logic to this. It feels right, not only just the numbers behind it, but the way household formation is growing. And property values. This is another one. You know, your house is your biggest investment. You don't want new development to impact that. That's a really rational concern. But again, when you actually look and study, this is again from the Harvard study. And you know, if you're watching this in the replay, you can pause it and read this whole thing. I'm not going to read out loud to you. But multifamily housing does, and specifically, so, and I want to differentiate, there's multifamily housing and there's low income housing, which can either be multifamily or single family. And this actually goes and shows that both of those, because multifamily can have multiple price points, and low income housing can be in multiple building types, that neither of those, multifamily or low income, causes property values to decline. And in fact, very often it increases the property values of the single family homes. So there's a lot of data on this, of not just these studies, but others that support it, that you see places in Greensboro that you look at and say, I don't want that here. But the conditions that you don't want were formed by policies that don't exist anymore. And the legacy of those policies lives on. And so in the summer, shark attacks go up, as well as ice cream sales, but shark attacks are not caused by ice cream sales. The idea being that when we don't know what we're looking at, or the history behind how certain elements of the built environment have evolved, we make assumptions and we say, well, multifamily equals crime, multifamily equals traffic. And it's not the case. It doesn't bear out. And especially when you adjust how the design is implemented, which is this is the sort of the next thing, is like, what is multifamily? These are this is in many cases the thought bubbles that come up. The top two are housing authorities somewhere. Housing authorities look the same very often. Lowest common denominator of design. There's no differentiation between the public realm and the where do you walk, who's allowed to walk where, the public realm, private realm for outdoor space. You have Pruitt-Igoe, the very famous housing project in St. Louis that was torn down, and then just some apartment complexes. The theme of all of these is they're buildings to house people that are devoid of urbanism and spend very little on the architectural quality. None of this is what is being proposed. And I want to talk briefly about Pruitt-Igoe, because Pruitt-Igoe was built just after the Carr Square Village development, which was also the housing authority of in St. Louis. But the Carr Square Village were townhouses, and the townhouse design, it was designed around a street. It had the Jane Jacobs Eyes on a Street, very similar in scale actually to some of what's being produced or proposed for this project. And the Carr Square Village, while it was disinvested at the same rate as Pruitt-Igoe was, the towers were separate, they were pushed back. In the towers, there was no social infrastructure developed between the residents, and they became crime-ridden. In the townhouses, there was a social infrastructure. You felt ownership of your front yard, and the design of the urbanism and the design of the architecture, by being place-based design, meant that Carr Square Village exists still today. It was actually sold to the residents over time. Pruitt-Igoe was imploded. And so what was interesting about these is the exact same people went into both of them. You would come, you would apply for housing, and they would say, okay, your application goes to Pruitt, your application goes to Carr Square Village. The exact same people were going in, but the outcomes of crime completely were defined by the physical environment. So not only in today's world, and we don't build Pruitt-Igoes anymore, but in how we design and develop housing, not only does multifamily, as we've just discussed in general, lower crime, multifamily designed around place-making principles will create a social infrastructure that you will know your neighbors, furthering a reduction in crime. And so no, this is not from anything I've seen what is being proposed, and the thought bubble of multifamily. It doesn't have to be this. Multifamily is a type of building. Then we talk about the design of what it might be. I know I've seen some of the videos of concern of projects like this. This is being built in other places by the same developer. But it's actually not. It's not what's being proposed in Summerfield, and that's again with the Dover Coal plans of why the Dover Coal plans are different. That this is not place-based, and this can be appropriate in other places. It's not appropriate in Summerfield, and it's not what's being proposed. So again, this is not what's on the table, and it's really important to continue to. And this is why you need to ask questions about what's being built. And when the proposals are shown, and this is actually what's being proposed, is to pull the buildings up to the street. Showing a major difference between place-based apartments that define streets. Cars are still there, but cars are secondary, which allows that connection to community, that you would actually feel like you could get out and walk somewhere. I would walk down the street. I would walk my dog on the street. I would, if it was close enough to mix of uses, very happily park my car and not get in it and go get something to eat for dinner. That's not an option on the sprawling designs. So you're right to ask questions, but what's being proposed is placemaking, and it's not sprawl. And so, an apartment can be a lot of things, but an apartment is built around place, which essentially is shared walls. It's a building type. And like anything, you can have, any building type, you can have beautiful homes and ugly homes. You can have beautiful apartments and ugly apartments, apartments that contribute to community and ones that don't. And so you're right to ask questions, but what's being proposed is something that is designed for long-term value. And that's where there's two key questions to ask. Is what is being proposed? What is the vision? And how do we ensure that the vision is executed? And until something's built, it's words and artwork. This is beautiful artwork. I would love to live near this. I'd love to live in this. But will it be built? And that's where the images here on the side are showing the some of the design guidelines that will put the guardrails in place. If you sign on for a vision, that you get that vision. And that's, from everything I've seen, what's being proposed here. So I wanted to, talk about the big picture vision. Happy to answer questions. My role in this, I can't answer specifically the number of apartments or the details of it. I'm here to talk big picture about principles and about the realities and myths of economic development and development patterns. And there's others on this call that can answer some of the more specific. So we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mary Ann. That was exceptional, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. I'd like to now introduce Irina, and she is going to do a presentation on the survey results. Irina, I'm going to put your presentation on the screen if you just let me know next when you want to shift the slides. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to walk through this very quickly. I know this is the part you all are very interested in seeing, but I'm sure you would like to ask Mary Ann some questions too. So I'll run through this pretty quickly. So I'll just give a quick top line on some of the responses. We wanted to be sure that we were speaking to Summerfield residents. And in this case, we spoke to mostly Summerfield residents. 91.45% of the respondents are Summerfield residents. And we asked the questions, do you want careful and managed growth, no development at all? Or do you want to hear about the pros and cons and the complexities of each? And I think Mary Ann just gave a good presentation and referred to the notion, 20% say no development at all. No growth really isn't an option. Slow and no growth won't get you where you want to be. You want to be careful and managed growth, which is what 68% of people want anyway. Do you believe the town of Summerfield could benefit from careful and managed development? And what would you like to see more of? I thought it was very interesting that places to gather, such as restaurants and coffee shops, which are, usually, in walkable areas, 69.87%. And then I expected hiking and biking trails to come in first. That came at 66 and change. And then boutiques and locally owned shops. And at last, but pretty close to 40% of people are looking for a variety of housing choices. That really surprised me. We got a lot of comments, right? We asked the survey questions, where you could create the charts and the graphs that we just saw. And then we asked for a lot of write-in answers, because really that's where you get your insight and in your intelligence, and you get a sense of the sentiment in addition to the pie charts. But this is where you really sort of see how people are feeling. So some of the comments that indicate people would love to see the development at Summerfield Farms take place, the items in green on the left, these are all the sorts of things they'd love to see and that are certainly possible. And then on the right, you've seen it, no high density, no apartments, no city of Greensboro, water and sewer, no new construction, single family. This you've seen all over Facebook, etc. More write-in comments. I want my children to be able to move back. We saw a lot of that. And also you should know that there are many people who didn't write in comments, but we just wanted to give you a sampling of both the positive and the negative. You can read some of these. And obviously we're going to have this on the website. And if anybody wants the slides, I'll see if we can get them. Here are, a combination of statements and identities. Summerfield has no main street or identity. The crossroads at 150 and Summerfield Road will become a memory, as the Gordon building is too expensive to renovate and keep. Protection of our vistas. No high density developer within the UDO. traffic is a nightmare. People, these are things you see everywhere, sort of any town USA, not just Summerfield, but these are the big contentious issues that we're trying to get to the heart of and get people talking about. The most important thing here is engagement, not even so much what the answers or what the charts and graphs say, but getting people to be engaged and informed on the issues. More of the comments. If you follow the ION subdivision model I'm in, once in a lifetime opportunity. If you have any questions on the survey, obviously it's not scientific. It's really just to measure sentiment. And mostly, one of the things I noticed here in Summerfield is you don't have a robust engagement sort of system in place. So we're doing our best to get as many answers. We've got over 400 now. And that's good. And we hope to get more. Thank you. And here's Marianne to answer any other questions that you might have if you want to come to the screen.
So what we thought we would do next is there are quite a few questions in the Q&A that have been answered, and we thought it might be a good idea to go through those and sort of help with asking the questions. So I'm going to go through those questions, and if your question's answered, then you don't need to raise your hand in the live Q&A. But if your question is not, and you still have a question, if you would identify yourself and raise your hand after we finish this. Judy Bastian wrote, I support this plan development. Since apartments are such a hot topic, would like to hear more about their specifics. How would they look? How many units per building? How many buildings in the community? Thank you for your transparency. Thanks for asking. Marianne will share some info about the designs during her presentation, including some schematic drawings we prepared to make the apartments much nicer than usual. The number of units in each building will vary according to that building's exact location. We expect some will have 8 or 12 units per building, and others will have 24 units in the building. The number of buildings is being worked on. There are 2 locations, one behind the trailer park near Summerfield Road, and one at the Saunders Village mixed-use area near the I-73 interchange. The building sizes will vary within each of these locations. Thank you very much, Judy, for your question. Then we have a question from Don Wendelkin. It says, will one of the goals be to reduce the amount of vehicle use in Summerfield? That answer is the idea is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, so shorter trips for daily needs and the option to bicycle or walk safely will do that. With some neighborhoods serving stores or businesses, some trips can be eliminated. Having streets that connect to each other offer shorter distance to drive or bike or walk. There are a bunch of anonymous questions, and we'd really love for you to actually tell us your name and share with us who you are if you're asking a question. If approved, how long before businesses move in to entice citizens to move in? Assuming the villages are approved, first text amendment just to make it possible to ask for rezoning, then the first mixed use components like the corner cafe should be coming in about 4 years or so. The other non-residential components would be added in gradually as the villages are built over a 20-year period. Another anonymous question is, where will Mr. Couch get his water and sewer infrastructure along with the water? He said it is required to build his development. There are several neighboring municipalities that have capacity and can provide water service. As a result of all of Summerfield would benefit from water fire suppression, better safety, and lower fire insurance rates. But the village's residents alone would be paying the entire cost for it. Homeowners who live outside the villages would also have the option to hook on, but would not be required to do so. And then we have Walter Opped. I'm sorry if I missaid your name. When number of apartment location was changed from 4 to 2, how were the 2 selected for no apartments? The answer to that is we were asked specifically to reduce the chances of the garden apartment sites immediately abutting existing large single-family home subdivisions. The Johnson tract is adjacent to Armfield West, and some of the Beeson tract is close to Henson Farms. So those 2 sites were taken out of play for garden apartments in this new revision. Another anonymous question. FYI, Summerfield is a limited service government. We moved here to live in a safe environment. We moved from Greensboro to get away from big government. Why should Summerfield become Greensboro? And the answer to that is we're not proposing that Summerfield becomes Greensboro. We're proposing to help Summerfield be the best Summerfield it can be. Another
can I interject? Because I think that's a really important point of the patterns of development and not this. There's nothing that Summerfield can't be Greensboro by the nature of it's just not the same, and the history of development again over the last 100 years. puts you in a different place. It just, the nature of your existing conditions mean you can't be Greensboro. Now, just because like the building type, there is an apartment type that is being proposed, but the development patterns around how that is being proposed is completely different because of the design that's been put out there. And that's why there was a note earlier. I think someone had mentioned something about Ion in one of, maybe it was in what Irina had just said, what Vince Graham's the amazing development he's created outside of Charleston. And that's the patterns of the development being proposed are completely different than the growing out sprawl. And by concentrating into walkability, walkable neighborhoods, you're changing the formula. So it's not Greensboro 2.0, it's Summerfield. And it's I think what, as Victor put it, it's the best it's Summerfield at its best. So that's such a critical point to underline.
That's a great point, Marianne. I love that. Please interject whenever. I'm just reading them off the screen. Greensboro is only 15 minutes away and has everything we need, job, restaurants, and ... The answer to that question is one of the best tools to reduce traffic congestion is to shorten car trips and reduce the number of long car trips in a day, a week, and a month, and a year. By including some everyday destinations like the corner cafe along the homes, we can reduce the need for long trips on the regional road network to accomplish daily needs. If you go to Greensboro for those same things, you'll be on the roads more, and you'll be on those roads at the same time as many of your neighbors. And that was an anonymous question as well. We have another anonymous question. How many roundabouts do you plan on? That will depend on discussions with the state DOT. Roundabouts help reduce the need for left turn lanes. We would like to see streets not widen, nor would we like to see traffic backing up for left turns. Those kinds of details would get worked out later. First, the zoning would have to be approved by the town, and then we would have to submit specific site plans for review. Another anonymous question. Parents with children will flock to our schools. The 3 apartment complexes that go to Summerfield Elementary are filled with school-aged children. We have the best schools in the county. We'd have to see the typical family size for families that prefer to live in an apartment in the Greensboro metro area. Generally, in most areas, families and apartments have fewer children, especially when tenants are young adults recently starting out on their own or seniors who do not have children. Another anonymous question. Victor, several water sources in local municipalities based on local public request in the landscape of Summerfield, it doesn't look. Who are you in talks with to provide water? We have talked to several surrounding local governments that have the capacity to provide water and sewer to the villages of Summerfield. We will finalize our discussions prior to submitting our development agreement with the zoning request. And then, what is the overall density proposed for the development? The overall density we expect will end up between 3 to 4 units per acre. It will be phased, and the density of each village may vary amongst themselves. Okay, so that's the end of our questions. We can go to a couple of live questions. So I'm going to open questions now. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand.
Steve, there's also a couple unanswered questions that we haven't been able to get to.
Would you be able to answer some of those, Joe?
I can give it a shot. I did just answer a question while you were speaking, and the question is, where are the apartment dwellers going to work if they're going to be biking and walking? And it looks like Victor's actually typing up a response to that right now. So what I was trying to point out, the thing about reducing car trips is making it possible to bike and to walk. So it's not just going to work that parents that live in a house or a single parent has to do every day. There's a bunch of other trips. So it's going to the store. If you do have children, it'll be taking care of errands for the children. So it's really, we're trying to reduce it. So if commuting is the only trip somebody has to take, but for example, dropping kids off to school, or they could walk to school, would be great if it's close by. If there's certain daily needs that can be met, either an office, doctor's office, or something, retail close by, that's also reducing traffic if it's close by and convenient. So that's the idea. And it's not just for apartment dwellers we're trying to do that for, it's for everybody. And so I think that's the answer for that one. Let me go back to the open questions. One's directed towards Mary Ann, asking, has she ever visited Summerfield to be able to tell us what we need to know?
No, I haven't. I'd love to sometime. It looks beautiful. So I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm telling you the principles of how development patterns play out in more places than not. And you can take that information and make decisions of what you should do locally. Every place is local and every place is global. I mean, as you know, we are sort of, as humans in the same economy, there are certain global principles that apply to economies and development, how we engage with physical space and the outcomes that are typical from that. And that's what I'm bringing here is a foundational knowledge of that. The calibration of it is something that's very local, and that's why you have this an amazing team that is in the process of doing this work for you. So my lens is actually better not being an expert on Summerfield and instead being the expert on how patterns develop in other places, to be able to show what or lend some insights into how those patterns would evolve.
Similarly, there's another question, Marianne, towards you. It says, Marianne, you say the artwork is great and the big vision is important. Who has the big vision? Question mark, David. He just sold a house in Summerfield, and is he preparing to move? Actually, I guess that's not towards you. That's really a David question, but I know David has multiple houses within this area, and perhaps he's just selling one of them.
Yeah, I definitely can't speak to where David lives, but I can talk to the vision that's been presented in the work that you guys have done in the development vision of building place first. And that's the vision. The vision is that the settlement patterns that have really become the default setting of everything spread out haven't served our nation very well. We have failing infrastructure. Its costs are rising, yet the end result of what's being produced is getting worse and worse. So we have to really assess, each of us. I'm assessing it in the community I live in here in South Bend, Indiana, and we're assessing it nationwide. You know, who do we want to be when we grow up? And this goes back to the quote I quoted earlier of, you know, sometimes we have to change to stay the same. And so it's about assessing, well, what are the things that really matter? And what's the package that gets us there? And very often we find that the package that gets us to the essence of the things we want looks different than the defaults that we've been working with. And that's where what's being proposed is the vision. The vision is to create place. I see Victor's hand up.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for letting me jump in. That question about where does the vision come from is really important, because the answer is the vision comes from the comp plan. First thing we did was we opened up the very ambitious and very carefully thought through comprehensive plan that Summerfield adopted many years ago before it went off to work on zoning that would be consistent with that comp plan. And what does the comp plan say? It describes a livable community which has mixed uses, has mixed housing types, and has high priority placed on preserving the wide open vistas. That is really kind of starting point for all the drawing we've been doing. I just thought it'd be good to clarify that.
The next question down says, we're not opposed to growth. Why can't we achieve the need for varied housing by including townhouses, quadruplex, and other housing types? That is the idea, to do that. The question is, can it actually be done with the current rules? In my review of the UDO, putting on my designer hat, like how can I use this to actually provide a variety of housing? What I found is that it's not impossible. It's just highly unlikely for a couple of reasons. One is that it's really easy to do single family detached houses. It's extremely easy. It's basically asking you to do that, which obviously I would guess is the intent. You can do other types, but you can't do apartments, that's for sure. Those are not allowed there. You can do quadruplexes, and the duplexes you can also do pretty easily. quadruplexes and triplexes, you're limited to the number that you can do within a development, and you can only do them under the open space requirement. So you're automatically having to set aside 50% of the land for open space. So you're now increasing the value of that townhouse or the quadruplex, because they would have to pay the cost of the land has to be funded. So when you're increasing that, then you're driving up the cost of the unit. So they would have to be really high-end duplex, quadruplex, and that would work for townhouses as well. The next question is from Priscilla. How many apartment units and on what total acreage? Why did the text amendment change to count duplexes, quadruplexes as one unit? That part of it doesn't have anything to, I don't think has to do with our text amendment. That's part of the UDO in the recent updates to it. We didn't have anything to do with that. So I can't really comment on that, because I'm not sure what the work behind that was. In terms of apartments, when we were presenting the plan last year, we had about 1,200 and so apartment units, and David has talked about reducing that to no more than 665 garden style apartments. And so that is the idea. And that is something that would get set into place when this project would come in for a zoning application. The current discussion is about getting a text amendment. And so, a text amendment is basically what it means is it's an edit to your zoning ordinance, the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance. So all the text amendment is doing is adding a new zoning district in the books. But in order to actually set all of those kinds of requirements, that's when it would be done, when a piece of property is asking for that rezoning. That's not what's on the agenda that's coming up later this week, but certainly something that will get discussed and settled upon for this project to move forward. Okay, Ginger and Paul, thank you for sharing your architecture expertise and facts with us tonight. My wife and I appreciate you sharing the results of the survey. The idea of having a mindfully planned placemaking design implemented over 20 years is reassuring. Thank you again for all your hard work and communication. So that's nice. Another question from Anonymous. The comp plan clearly states to remain overall density, single family housing, yet you are opposing quadruple that. Why not propose 2 units to the acre? Why not propose senior living? You can build up quadruplexes within the UDO. Okay, one thing is if you're increasing density, you're not necessarily quadrupling the density of the town. In terms of overall growth as a concern, the math doesn't quite work out that way, if that's the point of making that comment. It looks like anyway, you could do 2 units per acre currently if you were to do duplexes. So that goes back to that other question about the changes in the UDO that lets you count a duplex as 1 unit for purposes of density. And that surprises me, to be honest, as somebody who writes zoning ordinances. So the thing is, if you want somebody to come and build a quadruplex, you can't limit them to 10% of the units in a development. And you can only do it by setting aside 50% open space. So it's just simply not enough units that would gear up a developer to come in and want to do that. And so that gets at my point earlier that it's unlikely. And it is possible it would take someone eccentric who wants to do that, and they would have to offer it at a higher price than a simple unit because of land costs and because of the extra hoops and promises you'd have to do to get that approved. So yes, you can do quadruplexes in the UDO. Will anybody come do it? At least with the way the rules are written right now, it's very unlikely. Another question that says for Marianne, if you are creating areas where there is housing, business, shopping, etc., all in same area, how does this represent a rural feel?
So we have the sort of general categories within development of rural, suburban, and urban. But some of the most wonderful little villages concentrate growth closer together to then protect natural land away. So what happens is rural and suburban sprawl are actually very similar. The rural nature, it feels, when you're spreading out one house at a time, you've got a lot of pavement and infrastructure that's connecting houses that are further apart. That will actually eat away at the rural nature of your landscape. So when you can concentrate your growth in tighter pockets that are walkable, surrounded by the green vistas that you know and love, that's actually one of the best ways to preserve it. So while it feels like those two things don't naturally fit together, actually they really do. And it creates it protects and preserves the very thing you're trying to maintain.
Mr. Anonymous again wrote a question, which I'm glad they did because I forgot to mention it before. The question is, has there been any thought to retirement home community in addition or in lieu of apartments? There has been discussion about that. And again, depending on the type of facility that it is, it can come with different size requirements and features. So what the conversation for design standpoint is, either it could look like an older hotel, like one of those old hotels, so that it doesn't look like a one-story flat institutional looking building. One thing that's been very appealing is the idea to have individual units available for the more independent living folks, where you could have a small cottage that could be detached, or maybe some of the townhouses could fall into that, or some of the quadruplex and triplexes and quadruplexes could also provide that kind of facility. And then it's just a matter of, is there an operator looking for a location, and is this the right location to come in and actually build a memory care or assisted living kind of facility? So I think all that's up in the air. I think any combination of all of those is probably, and there's probably a need for that. So I don't think that's ruled out. So in lieu of apartments, again, that could be something that could be discussed and worked out. It's just at this point, the illustrations that we've been creating are all about creating a schematic plan to get something on paper that folks can see what we're talking about and try to work out scenarios. But at the moment, we can't do any of that that's with any hard proof until there's a real business plan associated with it. And we can't do that if there's no zoning in place. If there's no rules, then there's nothing for us to specifically say, yes, this is what we can do and what we can't do. And so that's why we're trying really hard to get to that point, so that then we can show you and it becomes real. In a nursing home or retirement community, it's going to take a certain investor to come in and do that. If there's no way for them to actually do it in a way that we're describing, or that they would like to do it and it would kind of fit with this overall vision, there's no way they would come in now and talk about that if there wasn't a zoning venue to allow them to do that.
I see one question, sometimes true, sometimes not. Speaking from my own experience, I've lived next to homeowners who didn't take care of their property. I've also lived next to renters who took great care of their property. In my younger years, whenever I rented, I took care of the home where I live.
That's changing pretty substantially in terms of, especially, so for multifamily, the developer takes care of it. The owner of the property management takes care of it. So somebody renting actually doesn't have to engage as much. And that's a lifestyle that a lot of people actually like. They like to be able to lock their door and not have to mow a lawn. Right now with mortgages, more, costs of housing going up, and especially with interest rates going up, there are a lot of people that are, that are very responsible people that are just locked out of home ownership. And so it's not even a choice in some cases. And there are a lot of, there's also a lot of people, especially, a lot of people that prefer the lifestyle. It doesn't mean that they're irresponsible. It just means that they have different priorities with their life. And so the idea that a house becomes run down because it has a slumlord in some way, or because it's a transient home is locked to another set, is sort of locked to a different time and a different type of place than a community where the developer is taking care of the rental properties. And even you see within single family, maybe if you have a large institutional landlord that's not present at all, that's going to be different than a local developer. I don't know if there's single family for rent in these communities, but rental, a slumlord house is going to be very different than an owner or a renter occupied home for someone that just either is locked out of the home at the moment, the homeowning sort of cycle, or just through lifestyle doesn't want to. Joe, I see your hand up.
Sure, thanks. Well, remember, it's not just about home ownership or the maintenance of property. It's about having, a lot of people want to rent because they don't want to cut the grass and they don't want to do things, but they are motivated to do other stuff. So like, do you know anybody in your church who doesn't own a home, and do they participate in activities that are helping the community out? Who's, driving the Meals for Wheels program? Does everybody that do that, do they own their own home, or maybe they might be renting or finding something else? What other kind of social groups have volunteers that come out and help with things, certain efforts, and all of those folks might not own their own home. It doesn't mean they're not part of the community and they don't care about the community.
Yeah, thanks. Those are really important points.
Okay, we have Carla Blewett. Allow her to talk.
Hi, thanks so much for holding this webinar. It's been quite interesting. At any rate, I heard earlier the answer to a question about why isn't there a plan just to build quadplexes, townhomes, et cetera. And the response was that basically it would not be cost effective because of the requirement for open space. And I was just wondering, is there an amendment that could be made that would make those housing types profitable for the developer without having to include apartments? Because the people of Summerfield, the majority, have made it very clear that we do not want apartments in Summerfield.
Thank you, Carla. Let me see who would like to answer that question.
Yeah, you could. Well, the text amendment is intended to set up the new district, and the one that we've written would allow more variety of the types for sure. Could someone else come in and just simply make a proposal for that? Yes, of course. It could be done. It would also have to address the density question. The other limiting factor to doing quadruplexes or townhouses is the overall density requirement of no more than 1 unit per acre. The spreading out the land cost and spreading that out among a fewer number of units is really what's kind of driving up the cost, which is why I had said that the developer would probably just walk away, and if they wanted to do that somewhere else. And again, that's doing probably exactly what the ordinance is intended to do. So it just reinforces that there will be none of these units in the town. The text amendment is in the UDO for any reason. So if it's, you just need to change a word here or there, fix some typos, or actually create a policy that needs to be added to a certain district or an additional regulation. It's not just there to create a new zoning district, but that's what we're using it for to propose.
Carla, do you have another question?
Oh, sorry. No, thank you for answering that question. It sounds like it could be done, but this developer is just not interested in moving along that path. Thank you.
There is a question from Don asking about, the question is there any chance this text amendment vision will not occur because water and sewer capacity is a problem? Certainly understand the problem with water and sewer. If we cannot figure out the water and sewer, then we probably can't make this project happen. So that's why the idea is to seek another source for the water and sewer. And so there's been a lot of discussion of tapping into Greensboro's wastewater for sewer and possibly for water as well, since a lot of his property borders the city limits with Greensboro. and they've done an initial analysis. And so the idea is that if this doesn't get worked out, it would be impossible to build at the density that we're thinking about at the moment.
That's a great answer, Joe. Thank you so, so much.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? I see a Priscilla Olenek question, so let me allow her. Here you go, Priscilla.
Hey y'all, welcome back. So
Hi.
I actually put up the question on the little chat box, but in the previous discussion, there was talk about something called multi-family mansion style homes. If you could talk about that a little bit, and then I'm still really unclear the way that the text amendment is written about uncontiguous land being under unified control. I've read up a little bit about that, and it appears that landowners could potentially rezone if it was controlled by either Mr. Couch or a development firm or whoever it may be that ends up with the project, that they could reapply for that zoning. So I'd like for the base to kind of understand that large land holdings and stuff like that could potentially eventually be added into a village. And I understand there's a rezoning. So if you guys could kind of discuss those things, please.
I'm not sure. That's really more of a question for the land use attorneys.
Yeah,
Um,
we didn't have land use attorneys on, and you acted like you had something to share.
it will be. I did see that in comments from city staff, so I know that that would be addressed at the meeting that's coming up on Thursday night for the text amendment.
And Marianne, did you have something to add?
I was going to say an apartment house typically is a building that if you're driving down the street at a glance, it's just going to look like a mansion house apartments. At a glance, it looks like just a mansion, but it actually houses, often 4 units or something. I defer to Joe as to if that's included in this project.
Some of the examples we showed would also fall under the UDO's definition for a quadruplex. So if it had 4 units in it and it looked like a house, it would comply. And even the definition of a quadruplex in the UDO states that there's a single door to it, which is again also the idea with the quadruplexes, that it looks like a house, so it would have a front door and a hallway inside, and then you'd have the units. It's really just a schematic design. So the idea is that these would not be grouped all side by side. You might have 2 next to each other. You might even have 3 next to each other. But the idea is that they are kind of located in a mixed condition, so that just like in general, with the exception of some of the single family houses that we might put in, because there's more of those than any one kind of type of unit, we would want to not have them all congregated together. We don't want the neighborhood to look like, oh, this area over here, that's the townhouses. And over here, we've got the quadruplexes. And over here, we've got the single family houses. And over here, we've got the cottages. Don't want to do that. We want it to be more mixed, and like you see when you go visit these older communities that we admire in the Piedmont region.
Thank you, Joe. That's such a great answer. It looks like we have one more question, and it's Molly Edwards. Molly, I'm going to ask you to unmute so that you can ask your question.
Has anyone surveyed the people who want to move to Summerfield and live in apartments?
To my knowledge, I don't think we have. But the point is, right now, anyway, we've been working towards getting the zoning that would in place that would let us even consider that. And I would defer to a market analyst for anything like that. It's a little bit beyond our design abilities. We can design it so that it looks nice for whoever moves in it.
Marianne, you might have some credibility in what you do to sort of share some answers about that as well, just because I think that that's an important question, because I think if you build it, the right people will come and have interest in those properties. But do you want to take the mic?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pull who might come. That is where, to Joe's point, that's there are firms that are experts in that, and they analyze the zip codes of migration to understand who's moving where and what percentage. I just sat through one of my hometown here in South Bend, and X number of people are moving from Cook County, X number of people are moving here. And so there are, I don't know if you guys have done that, where you've done a market survey of demand, not just of who's currently there, but who might be coming in. You want your this goes back to the no growth versus controlled and careful planned growth, is that you don't want a community where no one's moving to. You want more rooftops, but you want to do it in a way that builds to the future. And so that's the balancing point. So I can't say, in terms of the exact survey of people potentially moving in, you would need a market study for that. But if you're designing place and creating within a range of price points that can serve, allow your kids to move home or allow new families to move in, that's where the range of price points is really helpful to be able to offer a mix. Anytime you live in a community where you offer only a limited palette of housing types and a limited palette of choice, you end up actually, it's any monoculture where you're more susceptible to ups and downs of markets. But offering a mix and a range will help you weather more economic up and down.
Thank you so much, Mary Ann. As far as other questions and really thinking about that, I just wanted to add that we have done a market study with Zimmerman and Volt, and we have all the information. So we have a lot of that information if you want to go offline, and we'll answer more of those questions later. We're going to take 2 more questions tonight. I see Paula McMillan has her hand raised, so I'm going to allow her to talk and ask her question.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this in your transparency. I was just curious from the beginning of this process, and perhaps this is customary, but it's always felt like almost un-American, that it's not personal at all, but how like you could have zoning for just a person, forget who the person is, but a person that has over a certain amount of acres. So this doesn't affect me or my family personally, but I'm thinking if I were a builder, I feel sensitive to other people in the builders or developers that have less property, and like there's a set of rules for one person and it's different for everyone else. Like, why can't we all work under the same umbrella of rules? Thank you.
There's a minimum acreage to the way this new zoning district would be. There's a minimum acreage of 750 acres to even apply for.
Right.
The reason we did that was so that we could have all this property and master plan it, so it would be connected, and all the villages would sort of have connectivity for biking and walking, and we would be able to help with other things to make the town more walkable, more bikeable, and more neighborly with small commercial.
So you should demand your city officials allow you to build walkable everywhere. I don't know enough about it, but you should be enraged if your local codes don't allow you to build walkable communities. And so if you have to have 750 acres to be able to build a walkable connected community, that probably is a larger question about what your local codes look like.
It was actually we put that in there as a reaction to hearing from the community that, oh my God, if we allow this, we're going to have apartments everywhere in Summerfield. So the UDO currently for any of and this new zoning district falls within the open space. So the open space, there's 2 open space districts right now, the OSR, which is all residential, and the OSM, which allows up to 5% non-residential. Those each have area requirements, minimum requirements. So the residential one is 10 acres and would be strictly residential as a threshold. And the OSM with mixed use, the minimum would be 50 acres. So that one's already larger because you would want to mix some non-residential in there. So there's already that tradition in the code And so, like I just said, the reason the number is so high is really a reaction to what we heard from the community. I, like you, Marianne, should think that we would want the threshold to be lower. I'm not fighting for that right now.
That's a great answer, Joe. We'll take one more question and then we're going to close down. I see that Don Wendelkin has a question, so I'm gonna. There you go, Don.
Yep, I just have one question on the survey. I believe I heard there was 400 responses, and my question is, was it from citizens that live in Summerfield? If not, how many were there of citizens that did not live in Summerfield, if you have it broken down like that?
Yeah, we do have it broken down like that. 8% of the people who responded to the survey do not live in Summerfield. So 92% do.
You were able to identify those
Yeah.
because addresses had to be entered?
Yes.
Addresses and confirmation of residence. Don, I'm sorry, I might have.
That answered my question. I thought I heard that, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to reassure that that I was understanding it correctly. That's all I had. Thank you.
We did ask for addresses for that very reason. We wanted to really understand who we were speaking with.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with all of you tonight, and we thank you all for joining us. We hope it's been informative. We hope you'll reach out to us. We hope you'll go see us at villagesofsummerfieldfarms.com, and we will continue to keep you updated and abreast. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to let me know. And my email address is misty@blueridgecompanies.com, or you can go to the contact us page on the website and that will get to me as well. But we appreciate everyone's time and effort to come and join us tonight. And thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.